Legend has it that Virginia City was built on a mountain of solid silver, but it was more than legend. By the late 1860s, almost 40,000 people had converged on Mount Davidson. One prospector recalls seeing a vein of silver ore more than 4 feet wide and 6 feet thick. He couldn't estimate how long it was. In their lust for riches, men lived in tents when they had them, burrowed into the mountainside when they did not. They left wives, families, duties, and pleasures to tramp through the drifts of a perilous winter. Miners and prospectors who just a few short years before had headed west to the gold fields of California, now headed east once again, this time to Nevada, and to the mountain of solid silver. The Carson City Mint came into being as a result of the Comstock lode, numerous veins of solid silver that wound snake-like inside a mountain just a few short miles away.
Gentlemen, please. I don't have to tell you mine owners how much money we're losing. Transporting our silver to San Francisco is costing us more than many of you realize. Not only that, but much of our bullion is being spirited overseas. We need a mint of our own.
The dream of a Carson City Mint was born in the mind of Abraham Curry. In 1858, Curry had arrived in the Carson Valley with his son and several partners, and they established a trading post. But Curry was not content. He envisioned a major city, and before the year was out, he had purchased a substantial portion of the Eagle Valley from mountain man John Mencken. He paid just $500 and a few horses. Next, he plotted out a town, which he promptly named after the Carson River and famed scout Kit Carson. That town would become known as Carson City, and within a few short years, it would become a major supply center for the region. Soon, it would become the capital of the state of Nevada. Curry next turned his attention to the Comstock lode. He knew that the miners and prospectors of the new territory of Nevada were scrambling for currency, and that mine owners were looking for a nearby location where they could process their bullion. But a local mint would not prove easy to come by. After numerous trips to Washington at his own expense, Curry managed to convince Congress to pass the necessary authorization. And when word reached Carson City, there was celebrating in the streets. But when residents realized that getting permission for a mint and getting the funds to build one were two different things, the jubilation quickly subsided. For one thing, the Civil War was raging and the attention of Congress was elsewhere. Nevada was growing by leaps and bounds, but the rest of the nation was in mortal pain. But by July 18, 1865, Curry had persuaded Secretary of the Treasury, Salmon Chase, to send an assistant to Carson City. He quickly managed to convince the Secretary of the importance of Nevada silver and of the necessity of placing the project in the capable hands of Abraham Curry, Henry Rice, and John Mills, the Mint's first official commissioners. The design of the Mint was assigned to Alfred Mullett, supervising architect of the Treasury Department, and the selection was prophetic. Mullett would go on to design more than 40 other government buildings, including the San Francisco Mint, completed several years after the Mint in Carson City. On July 17, 1866, the mail arrived, and in the pouch was a letter for Curry. He'd received official papers finally authorizing expenditure of $150,000 to build the Mint. In jubilation, he set a torch to a nearby cannon. The entire town joined in the celebration. Construction was scheduled to begin immediately. The contractor? Abraham Curry. Curry hired 75 men and set them to work immediately. Although the excitement grew, Curry's pocketbook dwindled. Government funds were late in arriving. Curry was forced to reimburse the workmen out of his own pocket. By the time the cornerstone was laid on September 24th, Abraham Curry, the town's leading citizen, was almost bankrupt. Money continued to dribble in, but by the following year, he was so destitute that he once again had to journey to Washington to plead for money. To make matters worse, valuable machinery was stalled in San Francisco awaiting funds. Even local creditors were beginning to grumble. It wouldn't be until 1869 that the remaining machinery with which to run one of the most valuable mints in the nation finally arrived. Meanwhile, on the slopes of Mount Davidson, bullion was being hauled from the ground at a rapid pace. New square-set mining procedures had by now been developed to allow the miners to work deeper than ever before. But far below, on the valley floor, important documents, even the dies to the mint's coins, had been somehow lost in the mail. Abraham Curry made yet another trip to Washington. On April 17th, the United States Senate appointed Curry superintendent of the Carson Mint, and he left the city with promises of swift action from the federal government. The Carson Mint was officially completed on December 13, 1869 at a cost of $426,000, almost 3 times the amount allocated by the original government contract. And problems continued to follow the mint like an albatross. It still had no dies to produce coinage. Curry opened the building to the public in January of 1870 with a lot of fanfare, but without the ability to make coins. To make matters worse, when the mint was finally equipped, less than a month passed before Congress made overtures about rescinding the very appropriation, which brought about the mint's creation. Only the pleadings of Nevada Congressman Tom Fitch saved the operation from destruction. It wasn't until January of 1870 that the first Carson City coins were finally struck. In January of 1871, Curry, plagued by continuous funding problems and perhaps tiring of the conflict, resigned as superintendent to run for the lieutenant governorship of Nevada. He was unsuccessful and returned to Carson City, where he died in October of 1873. But the mint would continue with his legacy. The Carson City dollars, each bearing the now famous CC mint mark, which many claimed referred not to Carson City but to Curry's compliments, would become some of the most valuable coins ever produced in the United States. Unlike most mint operations, the Carson City facility was completely self-contained, with assaying, melting, refining, and coining all under a single roof. And the process of creating coins is fascinating even today. Molten bullion was poured into a vat of water where it coagulated into small particles. Then these granules were dropped into nitric acid, which separated the gold from silver and at the same time removed any other metals. The gold and silver was then boiled from 6 to 8 hours, allowing the heavier gold to sink to the bottom while the silver remained in solution. Next came a precipitation process which left pure silver. After washing to remove the acid residue, the silver was actually pressed to remove any excess water. The gold, after an acid boil, was reduced to a fine yellow sand, which was also pressed into a cake-like form. The bullion was now ready for the assayer and final preparation. Part of the process was the addition of copper, the amount of which depended on the coin's denomination. Once mixed with the silver, the bullion was remelted and then remixed. The finished alloy was then pressed into the necessary thickness of a coin. Blanks were punched out, and these were made ready for the coin press. Carson City coins were produced at the phenomenal rate: 100 silver dollars or 120 smaller coins every single minute. Later, 3 presses would produce more than 40,000 coins each and every day. Once a coin was minted, it was doused in acid for whitening, then polished by placing the coin in a revolving canister filled with sawdust. The finished coin was then placed in the huge vault for safety. During the entire process, workers wore clothing with no pockets to prevent them from taking their work home with them. The Carson City Mint began to grow. By the end of 1871, its coinage had doubled. By 1878, the building was enlarged. The old boiler room was demolished and a new stone wing was added. But while the building itself was gaining notoriety, its employees were becoming famous as well. Mint personnel were the first to bring baseball, the fledgling national pastime, to Carson City. In June of 1869, the Carson Baseball Club, composed of Mint employees, was formed, and soon they were playing rival teams from Virginia City and a wide variety of other towns. They kept the residents entertained for years. During the Carson Mint's years of operation, a wide variety of coins were produced, some among the most valuable finds in the world. A rare 20-cent piece, first struck in 1875 and later discontinued because of its similarity to the quarter, is an excellent example. Over 133,000 20-cent pieces were produced, and today only 14 still remain in existence. Trade dollars were also an important part of the Mint's production. For some years, a battle between those who favored gold and those who favored silver had been brewing. In 1873, Congress made the $1 gold coin the unit of value for the country's monetary system. Silver, on the other hand, could not be used as legal tender for the dollar, so the Carson City Mint went into production of what were known as trade dollars. Most were destined for use in the Orient, and over 4 million were struck at the Carson City Mint, 1/4 of the entire American output. But the silver forces seemed to be fighting a losing battle. By 1876, the value of the Carson City silver dollar declined to 83 cents, which further decreased the number of people willing to accept it. In 1878, trade dollars were replaced by the Morgan silver dollar, the coin which, despite the decline of the value of silver, would make the Carson Mint even more famous. Over 13 million of these popular coins were produced. But with the advent of the gold standard for the Mint, the handwriting was on the wall, and the declining popularity of silver would prove devastating for the Silver State. Silver barons who once heralded Nevada for its riches now moved to sell out as quickly and as quietly as possible. The Mint itself suffered numerous shutdowns as the flow of bullion ebbed. By 1884, when strongly anti-silver Democrat Grover Cleveland was elected president, Nevadans began to fear the worst. Their fears were justified. Virtually all those associated with the Carson Mint were pro-silver Republicans. Those that favored the gold standard were primarily Democrats. And so began a seesaw effect that kept Carson City and the Mint in turmoil for years. When the Republicans were in power, the Mint flourished. When Democrats were at the helm, it faltered, often closing for long periods of time as Washington brought pressure to bear. For example, in 1884, during the reign of Democratic President Grover Cleveland, the Mint was closed. In 1888, when Republican Benjamin Harrison took over as president, the Mint reopened, only to close again in 1892 when Cleveland became president for a second time. A silver panic began. Banks were collapsing across the country as frenzied depositors rushed to redeem treasury notes and greenbacks for gold. On June 1st, 1893, the Carson City Mint, suffering from the national panic and from a decline in the mines of Virginia City, struck its last coins. After producing 56 million coins, its presses fell silent forever. But it was scandal that proved to be the nail in the coffin for the Mint. In 1895, a shocking discovery was made. It was learned that some of the ingots in the vault were lighter than they should be. Closer examination revealed that more than $75,000 had somehow disappeared. James Henney, head of the gold sweating works, and John Jones, an assistant smelter who also doubled as an accountant, were found guilty. But none of the gold was ever recovered. The scandal, which involved several other prominent Carson residents, broke the back of the Mint for good. On April 18, 1895, all operations were permanently suspended. The Mint would continue to serve as a U.S. assay office for almost 40 years. But it would never again regain its former glory. In 1933, the building was incorporated into the Works Project Administration by Franklin Roosevelt. But despite the diversity, the mint would again gleam as brightly as the gold and silver it once coined. In 1939, it was sold to the state of Nevada to serve as the state's official museum. Over the years, several additions to the Mint building have been completed. Even the original stones from the original annex were saved and used to build a wall that today surrounds the parking area. The Mint and Museum still echoes with the sounds of yesterday. It contains one of the finest collections of vintage Carson City coins in existence. Nevada's colorful history is vividly portrayed, particularly in its fine collection of Native American artifacts. Visitors can also enjoy a trip through an underground mine, a world-class exhibit that revives the days of the Comstock Lode. They can even watch commemorative coins minted on an original Carson City mint press. Today, the Carson City Museum stands as a monument to the United States Mint, an honor few cities have ever held. And today, the Mint remains a tribute to the hardy pioneers of Nevada, who carved $400 million from a mountain, and then a state from endless sagebrush.